Well, I would love to just first kind of just dive in to your background and why you're running for Attorney General in West Virginia. I had a little bit of a chance to do a little bit of research, and you seem like you have an interesting background. So I'd love for you to just kind of talk us through that a little bit.
Sure thing. Well, look, I'm a ninth generation West Virginian. I've lived, I worked for Senator Byrd, Senator Robert C. Byrd, the last several years that he was with us serving in the United States Senate. I learned a lot from Senator Byrd and was really lucky to get to do that. And then in my law practice here in West Virginia, I've mostly represented coal miners and working people across West Virginia as our industrial economy has shed tens of thousands of jobs over the last couple of decades. I've got into labor and employment law to protect what our people have earned, hold on to wages, pensions, health care benefits, especially retirement health care is a big fight all across our region. And, I've been able, thankfully, to deliver millions of dollars in benefits to hundreds of probably thousands of people now across West Virginia and the region. So I've really enjoyed that work. That's what I do. And I work every day in that line. I've been in nonprofit legal services for most of my law career, and that puts me in touch with healthcare providers all over the state and the region all the time, every day. And people came to me and they said, "Look, this healthcare law." When I worked for Senator Byrd, there was a major overhaul of the federal healthcare programs, and I've watched that federal healthcare law over the past decade bring health insurance to hundreds of thousands of West Virginians and Appalachians. From East Kentucky to southwestern Virginia and down south and so on. And people said the Attorney General of the state of West Virginia has filed a lawsuit in the name of West Virginians to take away health insurance from 1 in 10 West Virginians. A massive impact to our economy, not just to coal miners, but to working people all over this state who will lose health insurance if my opponent wins his lawsuit to take away these healthcare programs and and health insurance. So, my work has kind of brought me towards this office. I didn't know much about the Attorney General's office a dozen years ago, and as I've done more, I've been involved in litigation to protect civil rights, specifically, West Virginia has an important constitutional protection for the right to education, public education. And we've sued over that issue to protect our community schools and children. And the Attorney General's office nationwide has gotten to be so much more important over the last decade. And I've seen that over and over again in my law practice, whether it's wages in healthcare or the substance use disorder crisis that we're facing, the overdose crisis, public education, infrastructure, just a whole raft of issues, consumer debt, small business development. The Attorney General lies right at the heart of those issues. And I see it all the time in my law practice. So I've been blessed really to do the kind of work I've done and learn a good bit about what makes our economy tick here.
Yeah. Well, that's a great segue into my next question, which was the role of Attorney General. I think a lot of people have heard that term, but probably don't know a lot about it. It's often described as the people's lawyer. I was wondering, from your perspective, like 30,000-foot overview, what is that role? What does it do?
Yeah, well, so first, the interesting thing about state attorneys general is that their roles vary a lot across the country. So I've learned a lot. All 50 states and territories and everything are very different. But generally, there are a few molds that you fit into across the states. And in West Virginia, there are two primary jobs for the Attorney General. Number one is to serve as the people's lawyer. Like you say, that means going to court to protect our constitutional rights, civil rights, small business, consumers, and workers, and fighting for the public interest generally. All these lawsuits against the pharmaceutical companies, to recover for the overdose damages that we've suffered, that type of stuff. That's job number one. But job number two is serving as essentially the general counsel, the in-house counsel to the agencies of the state. That means, the lawyer for the Department of Health and Human Resources and the Division of Labor and the Department of Commerce and the development agencies, and, all the vast interstices of the state government are advised legally speaking, by the Attorney General and the lawyers of the state. And so that means protecting due process, protecting transparency, ensuring open meetings, freedom of information, all of those things. I litigate on those issues. I've sued the state and the federal government, FOIA, open meetings rules, all the stuff that makes government accountable is the province of the Attorney General as well in this role as the lawyer to the state agencies.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's helpful, and I think it is helpful to know that the role does vary between state to state, and so something along the lines of that is that while that role varies state to state, I think it's safe to say that in all 50 states, the Attorney General, especially State Attorney General's role, is often seen as a stepping stone to higher office. I mean, we've seen Patrick Morrisey use it as a jumping off board for the United States Senate, which he rather fortunately lost. How do you convince West Virginians that you're in this for that job and not to boost your own profile or boost your own political career?
Well, look, I've never been a politician. I try to see. I worked for Senator Byrd, which was a blessing, But like I said, I got out of Washington and I came back to West Virginia because hell, I started off after college as an AmeriCorps worker down in Wyoming County, working on community development, advocating for people with black lung benefits, local land use, clean water, watershed stewardship, wastewater processing, all the stuff that we need around around Appalachia, but certainly around West Virginia to get our communities into better shape, And so that's what I started off doing. And I worked for Senator Byrd for a while just because that was a moment from 2007 to 2010 when, Congress was really accomplishing something. And I could tell that. It was right after the Sago mine disaster. And I went up there with a bunch of coal miners we went to a hearing together to talk to Senator Byrd about reforming our federal mine safety and health laws after the Sago mine disaster. And that's how I wound up with this Senator Byrd job. We were there talking to Senator Byrd and his staff, and they said, we want to do something about this, but we don't have anyone on staff who could do it. And they said to me, like I was 22 years old, they said, you look like you could use a job. Why don't you come work for us here, And it was just one of those things that worked out really fortuitously for me. So I went over there and we were able to do a lot. I mean, we totally reformed the federal black lung benefits program, nearly tripling the award rate for coal miners across the country. That program had been a joke and a laughingstock for decades, and it's still, you have to be really sick to qualify for federal black lung benefits, but nearly 3 times as many miners qualify today as they did back in the 80s and the 90s. And so we enacted some major healthcare reforms, which is what I'm here to talk about, in my race now today. We did some, but when Senator Byrd passed away and, things went south really fast with the U.S. Congress, and I just got the heck out of there. I said, I'm going to go back to West Virginia and do what I care about, which is tangible action to improve people's lives. I mean, that's just what I come from. My family, my dad's a public health doctor. My mom was a social worker, and I was just raised in a community of people that say, we have an obligation to one, and that's who we are as West Virginians. Stick together, do better, and so I did that for a while in law practice, and I got into this race because I've watched those federal healthcare laws make life better for so many hundreds of thousands of people in our state and millions of people across the country. And I said, I'll be damned if I'm going to let our state and our Attorney General come in here and in the name of the good people, the very good people of West Virginia, go up to Washington, D.C. to federal courts and try to take away what our people have actually asked for and won over the last decade, which is a better life and better quality of life and better health care. I'm in this office to do a very particular thing, which is to defend these services for our state. So I don't care about, I'm going to stay as far as humanly possible away from our legislature down there. I wouldn't touch those rascals with a 10-foot pole if I could avoid it. And, this office has important discrete functions. I love litigating. I love lawyering. It's what we need to do for our state, for our people, and that's why I'm interested in this office.
It's a great answer, and it's extremely helpful too. I appreciate that, and I think you've really built a very good bridge to my next question, which is You mentioned tangible benefits, tangible things that you can do in that office, and I think that's something that's often escaped by people when they go out to vote. You select somebody in a box, and you kind of forget about it. What what changes for West Virginians? What changes in their lives under Sam Petsonk as AG versus Patrick Morrisey as AG?
The biggest thing is that Morrissey is trying to take away health insurance for 1 out of 10 West Virginians. That number is so staggering, people don't believe it the first time I tell them. You look at this. The federal healthcare laws, just today, I just checked. There are over 179,000 West Virginians who have health care under the expanded Medicaid program for working West Virginians whose employers don't give them health care on the job. They can get it now through the federal health care law. 179,000. That right there is almost 1 in 10 West Virginians. Plus, there's tens of thousands of more people who have subsidized health care in the private health insurance or federal black lung benefits because of these reforms in the federal health care law. People should know that if Morrissey, my opponent, succeeds with his lawsuit, 1 out of 10 West Virginians will lose their health insurance. That means billions of dollars lost from our GDP, from our economy here in West Virginia. And then several folks have estimated 16,000 healthcare jobs that we have gained over the last decade while we had this healthcare expansion. We would lose again because where are you going to pay the people if we lose the money for the programs? I mean, it's the magnitude of the damage that Morrissey is doing to our economy and our health, and not to mention in the biggest economic crisis and healthcare crisis of the modern era. It's crazy that he's even trying to do this just simply to score some political points. But that is the biggest thing that people should know. That will change if my opponent wins his lawsuit and wins this race. Now, if I'm the Attorney General, what else can I say that I'll do? All the other work that the Attorney General should be focused on, besides these political lawsuits, which is all Morrissey's ever done. I will do the job of protecting our health care system. That means advocating for our hospitals, ensuring better competition in the health insurance marketplace so that we get more and better health insurance options in West Virginia. Look at the attorneys general of Pennsylvania and North Carolina, other Appalachian states. They have a muscular AG, an AG who stands in and does the job. The UPMC hospital system in Western PA was on the brink of collapse, and the Attorney General of Pennsylvania stepped in, negotiated a major consent order with Highmark Insurance, saved the entire hospital system, preserved competition and good health insurance, and hospital facilities for all Western Pennsylvania, from Washington, PA to Beaver Falls. And down in North Carolina, they had a major hospital merger, public-private merger of hospitals. The Attorney General down there did his darn job. We now have a $200 million public benefit fund in North Carolina that came out of the Mission Health hospital merger to ensure community health care and specialty care across Western North Carolina, out in the mountains in that most beautiful part of Appalachia. We have attorneys general that are doing the job, that are getting in there and pushing our healthcare system to protect our communities in the hardest parts of the country to serve. And that's the job that I aim to do, being active at the healthcare authority, being active in managing the health insurance marketplace, which are the jobs of the attorney general. I understand, I've been there since the federal healthcare law was written. I helped to write a lot of it with working for Senator Byrd. So we need to oversee those matters, and I'm ready to do it. I do it in my law practice at the point of a pen and litigating in court, and we need to see that leadership from the attorney general. So protecting our hospital system. Let me just say, Chuck, we lost 4 major hospitals in West Virginia over the last couple of years. So people know the failures of Patrick Morrisey. Wheeling, Fairmont, Williamson, and Bluefield all lost major hospitals. I will be there fighting to defend those hospitals and give them a business structure that will support their viability. So saving our hospitals and our rural health clinics and our charity clinics is something that I care immensely about. And then the laundry is so long. But let me just say 2 other things in response to that question. What should people look for? And I want to say this now because I want to be held accountable for it. the attorneys general can do a lot in the realm of broadband infrastructure development. We have a co-op law here. You know, you probably written about the rural utility service, the old electric co-ops that drove rural
Right, right.
electrification back in the 30s. This was a big Appalachian enterprise under the Roosevelt administration in the New Deal. Well, our governor, Jim Justice, up here wisely promoted the enactment of a broadband co-ops bill, and again, the attorney general, who has the legal job to handle all the complex telecom permitting to build these systems and actually give better broadband out to our people through these public-private partnerships, hey, he would not lift a finger. I actually had to write the FAQ and go to the regional planning development councils and the county commissioners and help people to try to permit these projects. The attorney general can do that, and the attorney general in West Virginia also has lawsuits with Frontier and other broadband providers. We have real leverage because, of course, broadband is not a regulated utility. This is a major area, and I know Kentucky's done better with broadband deployment. We need to push those public-private partnerships and through a combination of litigation and transactional work to form better broadband service across Central Appalachia. And, I know those issues. I've worked on them in my law practice, and we need to see the Attorney General do it, so I want people to look for that out of my office. And we need to look for it out of every AG around the region. I could go on, but land use planning, broadband, healthcare, wage and hour enforcement. Enforcing our traditional public protection laws. That means consumer protection. We've got, Chuck, we've got people who are overwhelmed with consumer debt, principally medical debt and student loan debt. We have in each of our states, and certainly I know here in West Virginia, thousands of lawsuits filed annually against regular West Virginians trying to collect medical debt, consumer debt. That is, many of those lawsuits are never even properly served. It's just bullying. And the Attorney General is supposed to be there to stop big companies from bullying West Virginians to pay arguable or questionable debts. So I could go on and on. I mean, the Attorney General is at the nerve center of government. It touches every aspect of our lives. They have real obligations to protect our people, to give us a shot at building wealth and opportunity. Haven't even spoken about education, but I mean, it's a really critical office. I've followed the office. I've litigated in most of these realms, and we need some leadership there.
Absolutely. You hit on a number of issues that I think are especially really important to people right now during the coronavirus pandemic. I mean, you talk about rural hospital closures in places like Williamson, where a hospital closes there, God only knows how far you have to go to get to another one. My sister lived down there and worked as a teacher there for a long time, and Gilbert, really close to there. So we're quite familiar with that. And speaking of broadband as well, another thing that I think has really come up during this pandemic, but also just in general in West Virginia, is opioids. And that's probably where Morrisey has had the most issues and been the weakest leader. I mean, you look at the connections that he has to Cardinal Health, how many millions of dollars is going to his wife's law firm while he is avoiding taking any accountability for the pills, like millions of pills coming into the state. We know that he's done a terrible job with that, but what changes with you? What are like 1, 2, maybe 3 things that you would do to help address that epidemic in the state?
I have 3 principal points that I always emphasize on substance use disorder and the overdose crisis. Okay, we have an overdose crisis. Thousands of people have died in West Virginia while Morrisey's been Attorney General, about 1,000 a year, and the overdose rate has doubled during the past 8 years up here in West Virginia. So the crisis is spiraling out of control. We got to remind people about that. We're in bad shape and we're going down fast right now. And so I say 3 things about this issue. You're right. It is a major issue for the Attorney General. It's part of our healthcare challenges, but it's its own species of problem. First of all, we can litigate against the responsible companies, and the way you succeed better with this complex multi-state litigation, and I do it in my law practice, and I understand that we have to collaborate both with our local law enforcement and first responders so that we actually document our losses. We don't have leverage to negotiate in settlement and negotiate and prove and put our damages up on the board in court if we don't do the work to collaborate across the state. Health departments, Narcan costs, public health clinics, all the facilities that lose public money. Much of it goes undocumented here, so we need to collaborate better so we come to court prepared to negotiate inequity for what is ours. But then we also have to collaborate better across state lines. Morrisey, like you say, is well known to have been a top lobbyist for the pharmaceutical industry before he moved down here and took over West Virginia's lawsuits against these very same, companies in industry. And he has run into court and undercut the lawsuits and established a low benchmark for the value of these claims without adequately documenting our losses. And you can talk to an attorney general or lawyers in most any state in the country, Republicans and Democrats alike, and they'll tell you Patrick Morrisey down there in West Virginia is undercutting the entire national effort to leverage the due resources out of the pharmaceutical industry by selling us out too soon for too little. So we've got to be aggressive, and basically it's collaboration. I can go into a lot more detail, but that's just point one. Point two, in fighting the overdose crisis and fighting substance use disorder, is this. Gets back to the healthcare issue and Morrisey's lawsuit to eliminate health insurance for 1 in 10 West Virginians. If he succeeds with that effort, we will lose by far the biggest source of addiction treatment and recovery dollars that comes in to West Virginia and to Appalachia. We have 50,000 people who receive addiction treatment services through the federal healthcare programs that Morrisey is suing right now in court to try to take away. So point number two on the addiction crisis is that Morrisey's cutting us off at the ankles in our fight against substance use disorder when he attacks those federal healthcare programs that are far and away the biggest source of financial resources to fight the addiction crisis. Think about that. 50,000 addicts in recovery paid for by the federal programs that Morrisey's trying to take away. How are we going to replace that? We cannot. We will not, and it will be a catastrophe. It will perpetuate the cycle of recidivism, relapse, and reoffending that we've been stuck inside of for the last 20 years. And there are a lot of people out there that profit immensely from the perpetuation of that cycle, Chuck, like you suggested. 780-some million pills came in from 2007 to 2012. That's a figure that's been promoted and reported on a lot in the phenomenal reporting of our reporters up here in Charleston at the Gazette-Mail, and people understand. I mean, think about those pills. What, it's $100 a pill, $780 million just over that 6-year period. The amount of money just boggles our minds. And meanwhile, people here didn't want those pills. They didn't need them. They didn't ask for them. They got addicted to them in large measure because they were forced down our throats by a healthcare system, an insurance system that was broken and bankrupt and was morally bankrupt, and we need an attorney general that will oversee and prevent that. We regulate insurance in West Virginia. We have an insurance commission. We can do so much better. I deal with this all the time in workers' comp. I represent people in federal black lung cases, and I see how our state has forced opioids onto the marketplace that were never desired, never medically beneficial, and as far as anybody can seem to tell here. And we have to do better. So the point is, point number two, if Morrisey succeeds in eliminating these federal healthcare dollars, there's no way that we can succeed with the fight against substance use disorder. So, but thirdly, to get to the place where we have an effective culture of long-term recovery in West Virginia and across Appalachia, we need to overcome the stigma of addiction and ensure access to affordable treatment. Chuck, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration is the federal agency that monitors and reports on these dynamics, and they have clearly explained and documented that stigma and the unaffordability of treatment are the two biggest barriers to success with long-term recovery. And it makes sense. When we get people back into the workforce and back with their families, they feel productive, they have stability, they have income, they can stay in treatment, they can stay in counseling, they can succeed long-term with recovery. But it's a lifelong challenge. And so in West Virginia, we have a vocational rehabilitation services program in the state government. And we have a Human Rights Act that says substance use disorder is a disease that merits and requires accommodation and support in family reunification, in public housing, in employment opportunities, so that if I'm working and I need some flex time to get in to do random drug sampling, my employer doesn't get to fire me just because I'm trying to comply with a recovery program. I mean, these are the guts, these are the little off ramps that cause people to lose their job, lose their stability, and fall right back into addiction. And, it's the vicious cycle. I call it the 3 R's of addiction: recidivism, relapse, and reoffending. And so the Attorney General has the tools, voc rehab, and the Human Rights Commission, which leverages housing and employment opportunities for people in long-term recovery. Morrisey's done none of that. He's let this whole human rights enforcement process essentially evaporate. There's no lawyers in the state here that are doing this work under the Attorney General to speak on. I think there's maybe one, and they don't even pay it. But I've written about this. I've lectured about it at the law school. I've tried to educate the bar. I've taught continuing legal education classes all around West Virginia, trying to explain to lawyers, use our human rights law to compel our public agencies to do right by people in recovery. And the Attorney General has a tremendous legal duty and power to promote that culture and real concrete opportunities for real individual people, person by person, helping them to find work and family reunification opportunities. And if we simply do that, we know all the research and the science. And if you talk to recovery coaches and people around Appalachia that do this stuff, they'll tell you, you give people that stability, they will succeed at a much greater rate with long-term recovery. And Morrisey's just totally failed and neglected and absconded with every good tool and opportunity to move us in that direction. So that's what I have to say about my policy approach on addiction treatment. And of course, like I said at the outset, it is really one of the biggest public challenges that we have.
Absolutely. And it takes a lot of dedicated effort to resolve it, for sure. So I got 2 more questions. My last substantive one I have is, and this is kind of piggybacking on a thing that John has pointed out before, my co-host. He ran for public office in the Eastern Panhandle in 2018 and did a lot of door knocking, and a lot of folks he talked to, once they found out that he had a D next to his name on the ballot, were turned off by that because for some reason they didn't like Democrats. What's your pitch to West Virginians who may be turned off by that label or that party, that they should still consider you over the alternative?
Well, the good news from everything I see about this race is that they are really considering me, because they see what a disaster and a disloyal official Morrisey has been. People don't appreciate disloyalty in West Virginia, and they see that in Morrisey, and they know they need a better option. And so here's my point. I'm old-fashioned. I always say I'm as independent as a hog on ice. I am, you got to register with a party here in West Virginia to get on the ballot. So I am a Democrat. I always have been a Democrat. But a lot of people in West Virginia have always been Democrats, and the national party has changed. Hell, the country has changed a lot. So there are reasons for the change, and they're not all bad reasons. But the Democratic Party has failed to deliver results for the people of Appalachia, and that's a hard truth that the Democratic Party needs to reckon with. And I've told them. I tried to tell them. I tried to tell Hillary Clinton, and I tried to tell anybody who will listen to me, which hasn't been that many people, apparently, because the Democratic Party seems to continue to drop the darn ball. And I hate that for them, because they can do so much better. But I'm with the party for working people. I mean, that's what I stand for. That's what I do in my law practice. And this office is so good because it's not a legislative office. Legislative judgments are complex, and it's a whole separate analysis, separate realm. I'm not wanting to be a part of the legislature. Like I said at the outset, I want to stay. That is a broken system, both in Congress and in Charleston. What we need in an attorney general is someone who can be trusted to serve as the lawyer for the people of West Virginia, who can be trusted to go to court and fight. Hey, when I say I've recovered millions of dollars, I'm talking about from some of the most powerful companies in Appalachia, multi-million-dollar companies that control the levers of government. And yet, I work with them. I say, look, you've done wrong. We go to court. We prove our case. We can settle. We can collect. I don't believe in beating people up. I believe in proving what's right and wrong and finding a way forward. And that's how I've actually taken away so much money for people. If you beat people over the head, I've learned, even in government, we've learned some hard lessons over the years about mine safety and health and about regulation. If you're too ham-handed, you can generate adverse unintended consequences, and that's a real sensitivity that we need to take stock of. And I understand that, and so what I'm about here is promoting results and delivering results for the people of West Virginia. And I think that I hope people know me well enough. They've seen what I do, when they hear about what I do, they'll see that matters far more than whatever label you use to put behind yourself.
For sure. I think that's a great way of framing it. And I think that there are a lot of people that would definitely resonate with that. My last question is this. You can't drive probably 5 minutes in the state of West Virginia without seeing something named after the late, great Robert C. Byrd. You mentioned working for him in D.C. I think you were a legislative assistant. Are there any memories from that? Are there any stories from that? Is there something important that you took away from working with him and in his office that has kind of stuck with you? I'm curious because like so much of West Virginia in the past, half century or so was shaped by his policy making and his ability to bring money back to the state and represent the state. So I'm kind of curious if there's a memory, if there's something that you took away from that was really cool or really important to you that you wanted to share.
The coolest thing by far was one time Senator Byrd was recognized for a Lifetime Achievement Award by something called the Grandmaster Fiddlers Association down in Nashville.
Nice.
And I got to go with him, and we were at the Grand Ole Opry together, and he was recognized, and we had a blast. And, I got to do a few things like that. I'm a banjo picker, and so being at the Grand Ole Opry to me was a big thing, and he had played on the Opry. I mean, here was a person who, 30 years ago, but I was really blessed in so many ways, but to get to have that type of fun with him and see, what drew people to him for so many years, for, 60 years and or more. And but what I learned from him is the same thing, which is that one of the biggest points that Senator Byrd always focused on was people. And I was really surprised when I went to work for him that I'd say about half of his office was not having to do anything with legislative matters, but with casework for individual West Virginians. Watching out for somebody that was going to lose their health care or lose their benefits or lose their home or whatever it may be. He had people on his staff who were looking out for individual West Virginians, and he never forgot an individual West Virginian. I mean, he didn't forget you or who your granddaddy was, and he had decades upon decades of memory, and he maintained that memory because it was so plain to see that he cared about and respected. And I'll never forget when Senator Byrd died, Jake Rockefeller eulogized him on the Senate floor, and he said something that I just thought captured everything about Senator Byrd, which is that Rockefeller said, Senator Byrd came from a hard upbringing, and he knew how hard the people of West Virginia worked, every single day, and he believed that the people of this state deserved public representation that worked every bit as hard every single day for each and every one of them. And there was an ethic of individual accountability, person by person. That's what it meant, I think, to Senator Byrd, that he remembered your granddaddy and your dad and which picnic it was back in 1958 where he first met them. And he would tell you that every time he saw you, and he's telegraphing, he's telling people, I honor each of our citizens, and government is about accountability to one another. And I think that's what Senator Byrd, he wouldn't maybe say it that way, but I think that's what he represented to people. And I believe in that, and that's what I really take away from Senator Byrd is individual accountability. And that's why I like this office. It's about going to court, delivering results, individual people, and you win or you lose, and there's a yardstick there, and people know you, they know what you've done or what you failed to do. And, that's the way government should operate in terms of metrics and accountability and personal credibility and personal loyalty. That's my takeaway from Senator Byrd. He had great patience. I was 22 years old when I first went to work for him, and I was chomping at the bit, and I thought, here we are in the United States Senate. Well, what are we going to do? And Senator Byrd was sat there in his palatial office underneath the United States Senate, looking out over the mall, and I mean, it was he was at the it would be easy to become very dizzy and distracted with power in that place. And he wasn't. And he stayed focused on people, and he stayed focused on steady progress, fundamental infrastructure for building into better results in individual people's lives, for decades of public service there that he gave to us. And, to me, that's what he represents. And I think that's why he was so well beloved by us, by the people of our state.
Absolutely. That's really, really interesting and really cool to hear. Especially the thing about the Grand Ole Opry. That's really neat. I used to live in Nashville for about 5 years, so that's a really, really cool story. Last thing is, where can people find out more about you, support you, those types of things?
They can find out more. SamForWV.com, SamForWV.com. There's links, there's news. We try to keep the news updated as best we can on the website, but we also the website links to Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and we're very active, obviously, on Facebook. And I love to talk about individual accountability. People can send messages to every public official now, and they see them. Don't think that they don't. Somebody sees those messages, and I read them, and I love that. And so I hope people follow us, share our pages, and we really ask people, if you see the importance of this race, remember, 1 in 10 of our people, of our residents, will lose their health care if Morrisey wins his lawsuit and wins this election. Think about that, and share, if you would, share the Facebook page. You can go onto the page and invite there's a little option that says invite all. It's not an endorsement. You don't have to say how much you love me or hate me, but invite them and let them see what we're talking about here. People understand so little about the stakes in my election. Healthcare is on the ballot. The stakes couldn't be higher, and I'm really hoping that you will share this race with people so that we can develop a better understanding of West Virginia about not about me, but about the importance of this office and what's on the line in this election and, going forward with the office of the Attorney General.
Great. Yeah, and we'll put a link to that in the show notes as well so that people can find it really easily. Sam, thank you so much for talking to me today. I really appreciate it. I thought this conversation was really great.
Well, thank you. Same. I enjoyed it, and I thank you for doing this. This is how we improve our understanding and our public discourse, and it's a real public service. So I thank you for everything. And I know it's probably a lot of work to keep these up. Yeah.